Adam Wasch, welcome to Legally Contented. Please introduce yourself to our audience.
Sure. Thanks for having me. I am Adam Wasch. I am a partner and co-chair of the franchise law practice group at Greenspoon Marder, a national and law 200 firm.
So, Adam, thanks for taking time to chat with me. I want to talk to you about your emerging Twitter presence and your emerging authority building efforts on Twitter. A lot of times, attorneys, especially business to business attorneys, big law attorneys, look at Twitter like it's the wild, wild west compared to the buttoned up LinkedIn or the more professional third party legal publications like Law 360 or Bloomberg Law, etc. So I want to dig into your path to Twitter and what you're doing there. But before we get there, can you talk a little bit about your background, your legal background from law school to where you're at currently as a partner at Greenspoon Marder, and importantly, how you got to franchise law? Because it doesn't look like you were always practicing franchise law from the days that you graduated law school.
That is correct. And I'll go back a little bit further. I went to University of Florida undergrad. I was a big sports fan, played when I was younger, obviously, as most kids do growing up. But I really had this knack for and hankering to join the professional sports world. So I started interning in professional baseball and minor league baseball during undergrad. I spent a summer in Brooklyn, and then for the Brooklyn Cyclones, which was a Mets affiliate. And then I spent my last summer after undergrad in Savannah, which was a single A affiliate of the Montreal Expos, not to date myself. But it was the Savannah Sand Gnats. And in those roles, what was interesting about baseball is you're sort of thrown into the fire. You're learning work ethic, different business tasks like sales, which is a huge part of my career even to this day. And so that background of starting in baseball really kind of has guided my path as I went through the ranks, different law firms and starting my own law firm. But after undergrad, I started working in the AAA baseball in the minor leagues in New Orleans for a couple seasons, and then ended in Colorado with the Colorado Springs Sky Sox before deciding, hey, going to different towns and flying to, having to cross the country to kind of rise the ranks in baseball wasn't really for me. Let's see what law school has to offer. So my girlfriend and now wife, we decided to move back home. I went to or applied to schools locally, and sort of a newer school was popping up, which was a pretty good value proposition for me, called the Florida National University, and otherwise known as FIU College of Law. It was early on as a law school back then, but really they've done a fantastic job of just kind of keeping pace with really quality law schools over the years. And ended up there and started like the Sports Entertainment Law Society. I really thought I was going to be this hotshot sports executive, coming out of law school and just, going right into MLB, after having my, minor league career, and realized that in law school, that I really just enjoyed the practice of law. I worked for a couple of small firms during law school and enjoyed just being a lawyer, and the allure of sports really kind of went by the wayside. At that time, it was 2009 when I was graduating, not the best legal market. If you remember back then, a little bit of a financial downturn. And, I just so happened to be sort of in the legal community through my clerkships, and found a job at a good Florida firm called Wickersmith, and had that job, a few months before I graduated. Was relative to my classmates at the time who were, not necessarily employed. And frankly, no matter which law school you went to, I think finding a position at that time was very difficult. You're kind of taking whatever you could get at that point. And it's a lot different than the legal market today. I'll tell you that. And I think you would agree with me on that one. Um, and so I went to, after graduation, I started at Wickersmith and, took the bar in Florida and passed the bar. And Wicker gave me an interesting opportunity to work in aviation of all fields. They had a big aviation practice representing manufacturers, aircraft manufacturers, parts manufacturers. And what I liked about that practice was it was very regulated, highly regulated. And so you really had to be aware of both the federal regulations, the state regulations that were in place when dealing with aviation litigation or an aviation dispute or some catastrophic incident that occurred that required our legal services. And so I was practicing in that realm. I was also working with our commercial partners, handling trademark disputes and Lanham Act type matters. And I did that for 5 years and enjoyed it. I was certainly on partner track there. Some of my friends are still there that are partners and have risen the ranks, including those that started when I started. But I saw, the path forward a couple of years, and I said, is this, am I going to stick this out and do this full time, or am I going to, what are my other options? So, my dad has been a transactional attorney his whole career in law for the better part of 3 to 4 decades. He had worked in-house for a couple companies, and at that exact time had just opened up his own, put on a shingle, had a few clients in the franchise space. He had been in franchising since I think the early 90s. And I was intrigued by what he was doing. And he was kind of giving me some stuff to look at to kind of my beak, so to speak. And so that's where I got my first taste of franchise law was, just kind of watching my dad's interactions with his clients. He was representing Tropical Smoothie at that time, which was a budding franchise company, and a few other established brands in South Florida. And I decided, listen, I've got 2 options here. One, I could continue at Wicker, or I could, see, hey, maybe me and my dad can make a run at this thing. And we decided that kind of combine our forces, combine our skill sets, and start a firm called Wasch Law. And so I said goodbye to my partners after 5 years at Wickersmith, and decided to take the leap and start something up with my dad. It's an interesting dynamic going from, the firm life where you have everything sort of at your fingertips and the office space, the assistants, the paralegals, to an office that, a single rented office inside another firm with a logo pretty much. Right. And it was scary. I'm not going to lie. I was keeping busy, really educating myself on franchise law, getting, starting to do a little blogging, and really immersing myself into another highly regulated space of franchise, and had to learn it quick because it was really, sink or swim at that point. I had a wife, no kids yet at the time. We were trying to start a family, and there was, if you didn't have clients, you didn't make money. As simple as that right away. So, I caught on quick. I used my sales background to, attract startup emerging brands. I know we're going to get into that, what my practice is today and how it got there. But early on, it was really take on any sort of business related commercial matter, but also with an emphasis on franchise. And what we did was we marketed to specifically and only as a franchise law firm, to attract, local franchise companies, and also, um, uh, you know, started representing national brands as well. From there, we added a partner in April, Rains, became Wasch Rains, and really stuck to our franchise roots, and started to build a very high volume practice for franchise work. We presented both franchisors and franchisees. We attended all of the primary, main franchise conferences, really injected ourselves into the conversation of franchise firms that entrepreneurs and franchisors and franchisees would hire that are based in the South Florida market, or likely anywhere that was looking for possibly a Florida related franchise opportunity. And we did that for 8-9 years. And we got to a point where our volume was so high, and the hiring of good franchise attorneys and good attorneys was becoming very difficult to be able to keep up with our deal flow and our volume. And Greenspoon recruited us back in March. Greenspoon is a well-known Florida-based firm that is actively growing in a number of key metro markets, including New York, LA, Denver, Illinois, Chicago. And we knew some of the people there. I went to elementary school with a couple of my partners that are in the Boca office. So I felt familiar with the firm, and they gave us this nice little landing spot of a national firm platform, and gave me the autonomy to sort of grow the franchise practice in a way that I envisioned. And here we are, and very happy. And report that my first 10 months or 11 months of the firm has been crazy successful, and a lot of that has to do with the firm. But I think what's also happening at the same time is my online profile and my activity has everything's sort of coming together right now, and it's a really exciting time to be in franchising and to work with so many amazing people, both looking to get into franchising and who've been in the business for a long time, needing legal services that I can assist.
I've got a number of questions, one of which I'm going to go back to your baseball background. Were you at the team that became the Savannah Bananas? Were you at the predecessor franchise?
100%. And my kids are now big Bananas fans. Yes, the Sand Gnats were a team at Grayson Stadium, which it's called Historic Grayson Stadium, which was more or less a ballpark that was very old and run down, and but charming, I'll say. And that is where the Savannah Bananas now play. I wish that the leadership group of the Savannah Sand Gnats had the same kind of vision as Jesse, the guy wearing the yellow tuxedo, has, but I think I'd have a completely different career trajectory. That said, it's really exciting what they're doing. And yes, I can say that the Savannah Sand Gnats were the predecessor to the Savannah Bananas.
Yeah. Most of us like to be on the after photo of a before and after. Unfortunately, you found yourself on the before side of that photo. And for anybody who's listening, who isn't familiar with the Savannah Bananas, they're a minor league baseball team that, as Adam was saying, fell on hard times in terms of attendance, the quality of the game, the quality of the players, the quality of the team, just wasn't going well. And then this entrepreneur came in and basically completely went against the playbook of sports teams and franchises. They had I think they had innings within the game where they would make their own rules. They have the umpires singing with the players. They have, I think, food included in the ticket price. It's Savannah Bananas. You can look up online, but it is like the ultimate contrarian view. And it was a huge gamble. I think he took out a line on his home. Like, he put everything, him and his wife put everything into this franchise with really no one had done this before. And yet here they are, right? Like a massively popular, sold out for weeks, if not months ahead of time. It's a huge deal now in the
Yeah.
baseball world. And you see him now doing thought leadership type things, speaking about customer service, client experience, because what he did was transform a franchise, no offense, Adam, but transformed a morbid franchise into a leading, gleaming example of what you can do when you focus on fans first, clients first, customers first. As a fellow 2009 law school graduate, I feel you with the difficulties of the Great Recession. And I remember sitting at a summer associate Philadelphia class-wide or law firm-wide summer associate program in the summer of 2008 when I was a summer associate at Deckert, where I began my legal career. And there were tables of summer associates at this event because it was some kind of Supreme Court recap event. So all the summer associates from most of the big law firms in the city were there. And there was one table in particular that is like blazed into my brain because that was the table that Wolf Block had. And Wolf Block was a well-known mid-Atlantic regional firm based in Philadelphia that was probably 100, 150 attorneys. They folded during the Great Recession. I want to say maybe late 08, early 09. And all I did was think of that table of summer associates who, in the summer of 08, thought that their legal career was going to get off to a great start. This is a regional big law firm. All their student loans, they'll be taken care of. They'll be off to a great start. And then because of things way outside of their control, while they're taking finals in 3L fall or whatever they were doing, they learned this news. And you realize, to your point, Adam, how different that market was for attorneys back in 2009, 2008 versus the 2020, 2021, where firms were throwing, almost literally throwing bonuses at associates to stay. I want to touch on a little bit before we get into your Twitter presence and what you're doing online, which you hinted at. I'm curious, when you were at Wasch Raines, how much of the business origination was you're doing? Because you mentioned how you had to start at a relatively early point in your legal career, getting business, marketing yourself, going out there and making yourself known. But how many of those efforts actually came to fruition when you were at Wasch Raines compared to letting those seeds grow and where they're starting to sprout now as a partner at Greenspoon Marder?
Yeah. So, I mean, early on, it's a lot different than where we landed 8 years down the road, obviously. Early on, I knew that, my skill set was, I was a trained litigator. And, I had the skills to be able to sell myself for, litigation type work, disputes, handling those types of matters. I feel like I'm a good writer. I was on the law review but the firm I had landed at was primarily litigation. So, from a sales perspective, I was able to, get referrals and from friends and local colleagues on disputes and, from basically Miami up to, Martin County and on the west coast of Florida as well. That wasn't the issue. The sales piece has never been the issue for me. The getting the franchise clients part was sort of a combined effort between myself and my dad. I basically became like his salesperson, right? I was selling him and his experience as much as selling myself early on, and so from a generation standpoint, I mean, we were able to um, uh, probably split the originations, I guess, early on. And obviously over time, I became the managing partner of the firm. And as I got my sea legs in the franchise industry and started to connect with younger franchise professionals, it became a lot easier. For example, one of my good friends in the franchise industry is Evan Goldman, who I've known for a long time. We met on the opposite sides of a franchise dispute, and now he's my partner and co-chair of the practice here at GM of the franchise practice. I was able to kind of insert myself into a group of young franchise attorneys around the country, and we'd hang out at the yearly events and and go to dinner, grab drinks. And so the sales part of the franchise, selling myself as a franchise attorney became a lot easier, and clients came, fast. One thing about franchising, and this could be said about a lot of what I'll call niche practices, right? If you really narrow in on that niche, and I really narrowed in on that franchise uh, practice area, blogging, getting myself onto lists, uh, super lawyers as a franchise, distribution category, um, uh, getting illegal eagles from like the Franchise Times, getting interviewed by multiple publications, trade publications in the franchise space, and just getting myself out there. It really helps you as a small firm in generating business and generating revenue. And I knew that early on, and that was my singular focus, was educating myself on the laws and making sure that I could back up what I'm selling, and understanding, the practice, both, in disputes and also the transactional side. Um, and, um, and promoting and getting Wasch Reigns, the name Wasch Reigns, synonymous with franchise. And that effort really paid off for me. Over time, certainly, my dad, he's a workaholic, I'll say, and I'm sure he's going to listen to this. So I need to be uh, PC about that. He loves working, and frankly, he's still of counsel to our firm and our practice, and we talk about work all the time. But I think he would agree with me that over time, the generation of work, really became my area. He certainly had his group of clients, and still does. But the size of our practice was primarily obtained through the various marketing efforts that I was leading, and certainly generating as joint clients, because we certainly would share efforts on the execution side.
So you've got what seems to be a lineup of effective tactics, because you're keeping yourself fed. You've got other colleagues coming in, you're keeping them fed, and you are deemed to be worthy of being absorbed or brought in by Greenspoon Marder. So you're doing things right. But why Twitter? As you are humming along, you're doing what I would consider to be the traditional playbook, which, by the way, many attorneys don't follow. So it's there, it's out there in the public. They know they can follow it, but many have that head down mentality where when they're incentivized by the billable hour, they just bill because they know they can get their bonuses that way. I'm very familiar with that mindset. I had that mindset for 6.5 years as a litigation associate. That's what I did. I was rewarded for my hours. So what the hell? I'm going to bill till I get my bonus and go above and beyond that. But you're doing these things. When does Twitter start to come onto your radar as another type of tool that you could use, whether it's just to do research, whether it's to keep your ear to the ground of what franchisees or franchisors are saying, and as an overall kind of marketing and business development tool?
Yeah, and I appreciate the billable hour method of getting ahead and getting to that next level. And frankly, that for the first 5 years of my practice at the first firm, I mean, that was, you're heavily incentivized to bill as many hours as possible. So I saw that life, and I was part of that life, and frankly, that's when Twitter sort of entered the lexicon during that life. I started out with my Twitter feed as an anonymous Twitter feed, speaking mostly to like aviation, commercial type, commercial law type focus, but it was a lot of aviation stuff. I was really into that area at the time, and my handle, I think, was like aviation litigator, and I didn't have my picture up. I was, sort of, uh, uh, behind the scenes commenting on, aviation related disasters or, catastrophic incidents that were made national news, that I really could insert some, legal opinions on, and got probably my first, 500 followers through that. That was sort of short lived, because I had, ended up jumping ship and focusing my efforts on franchising, and became myself. And it never really was a huge business driver for a long time, but I would enjoy um, promoting, the my clients. I would enjoy pro- offering some updates on the law, those sorts of things. But I never really found the kind of community that I'm in now. That I just call like hashtag like SMB twit, where I'm able to now be this like sort of authority on franchise law, and be a resource for people that are both interested in franchising and are already in the industry, doing some cool things.
For those of you who aren't familiar, SMB Twit would be short for small, medium-sized business Twitter. Just like there's appellate Twitter, there's legal Twitter, there's a whole range of Twitter communities, informal, organized around certain hashtags and certain personalities. SMB Twitter is certainly one of them. How did you know that your audience was in Twitter? Because so much of effective marketing and business development for lawyers is knowing where your people reside. If you are chasing general counsel at fintech companies or insurance companies or hotel and other leisure tourism companies, they might be on LinkedIn. They might be somewhere else. So how did you know that Twitter was the place that you should not just start listening to and putting your ear to the ground at, but also become more actively involved in?
The trial and error, I'd say. I admittedly tried to, start like a hashtag franchise Twitter, with some of my colleagues in the franchise world. And what I found was that most lawyers at firms or even at their own firms felt they had this like governor, right? This sort of inability to be themselves online. And so, you see a lot of lawyers out there, and many in the franchise space, who have a Twitter handle, but it's basically just a bunch of retweets or a bunch of, just sort of, cut and paste sort of updates in the laws, very vanilla, um, uh, type posting. And what I've learned over the years, and it's very difficult in our profession. What I've learned over the years is being your true, genuine self is probably your best way to market, and also to develop a book of business, and to develop some longevity in the legal marketplace. And so what I found with Twitter was, it wasn't like me just promoting all the successes and all the things that my firm was doing, that I typically would see on LinkedIn. It was, hey, I'm watching something and I just want to put out my thoughts about it. Or, hey, I'm, interested in sharing something with my kid about my kids, or something interesting that will maybe other like-minded people have also experienced. I can just put that out there. So interspersed with franchise specific successes and responses to questions that people might have on Twitter, which you can do instantaneously through the platform. You're really able to share with your followers like who you are, like your personality. And I've been on other platforms, and including LinkedIn, and I really didn't feel the same sort of instantaneous connection with the people that were in my little community, which is obviously now rapidly expanding, which is fantastic. And it's really just being myself. And that's really what I enjoyed about Twitter, what I still enjoy about Twitter, and has worked for me so far.
how did you get a sense of when to alternate between the attorney providing interesting information, of course, not legal advice, but the attorney providing information, analysis, guidance, insights versus Adam, the human being, the spouse, the father, the human, the sports fan, what have you? Because I think a lot of people struggle with that. A lot of attorneys struggle with that because it is easy to stay buttoned up because that's like the default, right? Arguably pre-COVID, before we started zooming into each other's living rooms, kitchens, whatever, it was much more guarded. There was work Wayne and work Adam, and there was leisure Wayne, leisure Adam. And that's changed a lot. I'm curious, on a platform like Twitter, where you are most likely engaging on your phone, right? So you could be in the moment, you can snap a photo of a food that you're eating, of your kids doing something, of something you see in the background. How do you go back and forth? Because you obviously don't want to be so personal where people don't take you seriously. But if you're so buttoned up, it's hard for them to actually build rapport with you because they're just seeing, to your point, another attorney stating that they were humbled to be honored by super lawyers or whatever, and then include the link to the press release. So how do you balance professional and leisure and personal?
Right. I think it's understanding the boundaries and the lines, obviously, between, you know, as elementary as like giving legal advice versus giving someone just a curbside opinion, or saying something that might be confidential, like to a deal or to, something that you're aware of because you're in the industry, and knowing the lines. And I think it takes some time to sort of figure out where you should land on that. But I've found that, being able to show off my personality and be me, and combined with, the ability to present yourself as an authority in whatever field you're in. And in mine is, just happens to be franchise law. Does give you the sort of confidence to be able to share publicly general points that might be interesting to whatever the topic is. So if for example I'm posting something about changes in the FTC franchise rule guidelines for 2023, I'm not only putting out the information of, hey, this is going to impact how franchisors need to draft their legal documents and interact with franchisees, but I'm also giving people sort of a ability to respond, to communicate with me via DM. Franchisors that are, impacted, might see it and ask me some more personal questions about it. And I'm always responsive. I actively am on my DMs on Twitter and responding. And when it gets to that line of, hey, this is like, I need to be your actual formal counsel here in order to proceed with giving you legal advice, that's where it goes to email and it goes to conflicts checks. It goes to, engagement letters. So I think over the years, I've done a nice job of sort of putting out the generic information, interacting on certain topics with, and giving a franchise spin on it. But then when it gets to actual legal advice or someone asking specific questions about their particular situation, saying, listen, I can give you my general guidance, but I do feel like, a more formal relationship will be required to proceed. So it's not always easy, certainly. But I think I know the lines. I've done the research and know that, what I'm putting out there publicly is public information. And when it gets to a point where I know I need to, actively represent someone or give them actual legal advice. That's the route I go.
Can you talk a little bit about the business model of a franchise law practice, or maybe the dynamics is a better word, of a franchise law practice vis-a-vis the content that you put out there? Because I'm curious, as a franchise lawyer, are you only representing franchisees versus franchisors, which means that you can put your flag in the ground and take a pro-franchisee or anti-franchisor approach because you'll never represent the other side? Are franchise legal matters, are they litigation? Are they more like corporate ongoing counsel? Because I would think the kind of work you do for clients and who these clients are is going to dictate the kind of information you put out there. For example, you can have plaintiffs' attorneys on Twitter who will just destroy insurance companies and corporations because they're never, ever in the foreseeable future going to represent those companies. But if you're playing both sides as a franchise lawyer, franchisee, franchisor, you're going to have to be more circumspect, I would think, about the shots you take, if any, because you don't want to upset a would-be client or referral source down the road because you thought you had a slick one or two liner that was going to get a bunch of likes and make a good impression on people.
Yes, I'll take that in two parts. The first part being the main areas that I feel are or that lead to a successful franchise practice, and then I'll take on the pro franchisee, pro franchisor in the same context as you've described of being a plaintiff, personal injury attorney, a trial lawyer versus the defense counsel, which in reality is similar in my industry. So there is that dynamic in play. But first, I really feel like there's 5 pillars of a successful franchise practice, and which is, this is certainly my opinion, and but it's also based on what I've seen with some of my colleagues who have done a very nice job in the boutique space, and also developing, franchise practice at a bigger firm. But the first is, franchisor representation. That's kind of the really exciting pillar of being a franchise attorney. There are various categories there, startup, emerging, and established brands. But representing franchisors, really provides that recurring revenue stream, with quarterly and yearly FDD updates, the franchise closings, the FDD updates happen, maybe really anytime a material change happens to a franchisor. You also get to do the trademark work, and then dispute resolution, of course, which leads to possible litigation, arbitration with franchisees, as well as the administrative regulatory side, which would be the state registrations, which there are states that require registration, both initial and then yearly renewals. And so once you get a franchisor in your door, you're really there's constant work, depending on how active the franchise is, how fast they're growing. You really can make a good go at it just representing franchisors. Early on, we represent a few brands. We were representing Tropical Smoothie and a brand called Miami Subs, which was giving us consistent work. But I've always loved working with entrepreneurs, and so I was really pitching my services to the businesses that were looking to expand through franchising. And frankly, I was undercutting what I knew to be the market to get that initial work in the door, knowing that because my margins were so low and had very, very little expenses at the time, once I got that client in the door and was able to draft the franchise disclosure document for them and get them launched, that constant source of work would be there. So that was really my early on marketing to franchisors, and how I basically went from 5 to 10 franchisor clients to 20 to 50, and now I represent over 100 franchise brands of all sizes, and our team at GM represents over 200 brands, combined. So, we really, our bread and butter is the franchisor practice, and certainly, catering to the growing brands. The second is, part of my practice that is becoming, a real boon, I'll say, on Twitter, is franchisee, investor, and developer representation. And that is where we're finding a lot of young entrepreneurs that are looking to purchase franchises, development areas, development territories, multi-units, and getting with either a solo investor or putting together a sort of, small private equity fund to purchase the rights to develop units. That's becoming a super area for me, and has been for a long time, but, mainly through my connections on Twitter. And, what I do is I basically do like a deep dive into the franchise disclosure document for my clients. I'll identify, any key terms, red flags, negotiating points, and break down a 250-page document into something like 6 to 8 page memo, summarizing my key findings. And then, we'll spend a lot of time with the client, and some have varying degrees of familiarity with franchising, but it's usually the first time franchise investor that I'm speaking to. And, I'm able to, give them a good deep education on what it's like to be a franchisee, the relationship that, and the control the franchisor will have over the concept, and also your ability to develop and buy more locations. And then I'll, proceed to assist the client with negotiating, the deal with the franchisor. And most people don't realize a lot of startup and emerging brands are willing to negotiate with franchisees to get the deal done. And that is usually done through an addendum. So, when I'm dealing with a startup and emerging brand on the franchisee side, I'll push the envelope a little bit, but within reason, knowing what I can score and what I would advise my franchisor clients to agree to or not to agree to. I use, my that side of my practice in helping my franchisee clients. But most of the, established brands are going to say, take it or leave it. And, there won't be too much negotiation there. But then once the investor, closes, I generally stay in touch with them until the next deal. So, it's not as consistent work. It's more of like a, 2-3 month engagement maybe. And then, you're sort of hoping to get the next one. So it's a little bit, it could be a one-off situation. The third pillar that, is becoming, and I admit to you, I listened to, Eric's podcast, and he spoke a lot about, M&A work, and I like to break down the franchise M&A transaction work into 2 categories. One being for deals that a non-franchise attorney may be handling for a client in the franchise space. I inject myself into the conversation by assisting the counsel and the client with understanding the franchise piece of the transaction. And I'll also do the negotiations with the franchisor on any negotiated terms, because that buyer is going to need to sign a then current form of the franchise agreement and be bound by the terms the franchisor has for 10 years, 20 years. And so it behooves any transactional M&A attorney that doesn't have that franchise background to get a franchise attorney involved in that transaction to help counsel the client on those franchise specific issues. The other part of the M&A practice is handling the transaction from start to finish, franchise and non-franchise. Certainly we do both, but one of the reasons why I made the jump to, or we made the jump from Wasch Reins to GM was, GM has a really great M&A team based out of New York, and our deals at Wasch Reins were anywhere from 1 million to, let's say, 10 million. And I knew, we would need some firepower if we were going to go after the bigger deals. And that's exactly what happened. Within the first 3 months of me starting, we got a transaction in that was far, far above 10 million bucks. That was a 100-unit franchisor acquisition by a New York-based private equity fund. And we handled the transaction. Great experience with working with the GM M&A attorneys, and I was able to spearhead the transaction and also assist with the franchise specific issues, and also bless the final documents as they went through. And we worked with some good counsel on the other side, of course. And those are the deals that we're hunting now. And frankly, we've got the team to do. But this area is really hot, and I treat the $250,000 buyers with the same care and consideration as I would the $50 million transactions. And Eric spoke to that on his podcast, and I the sentiments that there are a very few deal lawyers out there that will give the same attention to the smaller deals as they would in the larger transactions. And I think that space is really where a lot of the action is. And I enjoy being a part of that action and handling those, single unit deals, 10-unit deals, 50-unit deals, those sorts of things. As a trained litigator, the fourth pillar of my practice is in dispute resolution, I'll say, also known as litigation. Most franchise agreements put their disputes in arbitration. So, we are actively litigating multiple cases. I do take franchisee cases against brands that I don't represent. I also represent my clients when they find themselves in disputes with franchisees, and will take franchisors that I don't otherwise represent, but are represented by a non-litigation attorney, and will assist that client with litigation needs. And what's interesting about franchising is, and it's sort of rare in a lot of fields to see sort of these hybrid attorneys. And you find that a lot in the franchise space, because, I feel like the lawyers that are able to draft the documents and also have in their mind how the disclosures and how the franchise agreement might read to a judge or might read in court, or how that dispute over a certain provision might play out, really is of value to the franchisor clients, because I can tell when I'm reading an FDD that is drafted by a purely transactional attorney, and I look mostly to the dispute resolution clauses in particular, and can tell, like, how is this going to work in reality. And I've also litigated the finest nuances of franchise agreement language, which helps me draft a better FDD, better document for my franchisor clients. The last pillar, don't need to go into too much detail, but I like doing trademarks. And trademarking is one of the elements of being a franchise. And I picked it up early, did a lot of trademark work early in the early days of Wasch Reins, and just kept it going. And we offer that as a package, part of the package deal for startup brands, and also certainly maintain trademarks and file trademarks all the time, are established and emerging and established brands.
Before we get into how these 5 pillars impact the content you put on Twitter, which, by the way, you've got what, 4,000, 4,100 followers on Twitter. So you are slowly building quite the following. But you've referred to Eric Pacifici. He was on the October 15th, 2022 episode of Legally Contented. He is an ex-Kirkland associate for people who aren't familiar. And while Adam's 4,000 plus Twitter followers are wonderful and probably well more than most big law lawyers, Eric's Twitter following is up to 51,000 or so. And he is setting, I think, a new bar. And many people think a new bar for what is possible from a lawyer who goes on Twitter, gives knowledge, gives insights, retweets what people are saying, is very generous with his time and his platform, and created such a following, although he started anonymously, created such a following that he left Kirkland & Ellis to launch his own small business M&A firm based on the deal flow that he got from Twitter, which that sentence doesn't seem like it should make sense. Who leaves Kirkland & Ellis to go out on their own based on what they've been able to do on Twitter? But he has created a platform for himself, and I think is a leading example of the utmost highest level of what's possible when it comes to a lawyer on Twitter, complying with ethical obligations, not defaming anyone, but yet providing information, insights, and building a community, building a following, and getting such incredible opportunities to do deals that he left K&E to launch his own practice. So on that note about content, talk a little bit about what your practice is and those 5 pillars, how that shapes what you say on Twitter, which is you have a public timeline. Anybody can see it, whether they follow you or not. It's searchable on Google, searchable on Twitter itself. How do those pillars shape what you say on Twitter?
Yeah. So I'll start by saying that Eric is the gold standard of Twitter right now. I mean, he is not only an excellent poster, but he's actually like a really good person. And so you can kind of get that sense through Twitter, but when you get to know him a little better, he's very giving, and it's just nice to be in his orbit on social media. And frankly, I call it the Pacifici effect. If you are in that orbit, it sort of can take your profile from, sort of doing typical lawyer things to doing some pretty amazing things. So I'd have to say that a good chunk of my followers are directly attributed to my ability, my interactions with him, and also my having worked with him in real life on deals, and we have a good working relationship, and it's directly from our interactions on Twitter, and it's been a really great ride. But as far as the pro franchisor, pro franchisee, and where you land, I've always said that I feel it is every franchise lawyer's duty to, root out the bad actors, to identify what I'll just say, the fraud, or the publicly known fraud in our industry. So I've got, I'm not necessarily playing either side. I see the industry as like a whole, and so I'm able to, see the arguments from both sides. I don't necessarily think it benefits, for example, a franchisor if you are just pro franchisor without really seeing the issues from the franchisee's perspective and from their side, and having represented franchisees and franchisee associations in systems where the franchisor is not acting in a way that is, in my opinion, appropriate. I'm able to counsel my franchisor clients to avoid those problems and to see it from the other side. And the same goes for franchisees that I represent. If I see an issue that they think is a problem, but I can tell them how the franchisor is going to react to them, filing litigation or taking some stand that may be contrary to their contractual rights. So, I think seeing things from like a 360-degree purview, like way high above the clouds on both sides, not only guides my practice, but it's able to guide how I interact with people on Twitter, what I post, and it's worked.
How much time are you spending on Twitter? Is this something where you're doing the equivalent of, I'm going to sit down an hour and I'm going to just be on Twitter and respond to people and post my content? Or are you swooping in and out as you get done one task for a client? You need to cleanse your brain for 10 minutes. How are you using Twitter? Because I think a lot of people look at that the way they look at blogging or article writing, where it is a high intensity activity for 2, 3, 4, 5 hours, maybe all at once, maybe split up, but it's very intense. Yet Twitter is the kind of thing where you can flip through the timeline, you can respond with a quick 3, 4 words and move on with your day. So how do you balance being a partner, doing the client work, managing people, and the other marketing things you're doing, and then trying to build your presence on Twitter and be active on the service?
Yeah. The short answer is I drink a lot of coffee. I also am up pretty late. But I'm also very accessible to my clients and, interact with them on text and email, whatever platform they want to interact with me on. So I'm used to using my phone a lot, and most of my Twitter activity obviously is from my phone. I feel like I'm more in the boat of the interspersed between client work. I'm going on to Twitter and just checking to see what's updating, or, any DMs that have come in for either clients or people that are looking to, ask questions or work with me. But I'm on my phone a lot, I will say, to my wife's chagrin. I try to manage everything the best I can, and also, be home for dinner and coach my kids in youth sports and all that stuff. I'm working, it's a work in progress, but I am pretty quick. And I really feel like, responding to not only DMs, Twitter posts that mention you, or getting involved in franchise related discussions quickly. It's the same. I treat Twitter the same way, almost like a client. It's a high needs client, if you will. But it's also, um, uh, reaching, a lot more people. So it's great.
The irony is, if you had the CEO of Twitter as your client, you have a high needs client as well in the form of Elon Musk. So there's some irony there. As we start to wrap up, I want to ask you a couple more questions. One, I'm curious, how did you know Twitter was working? How did you know that there was starting to be a little bit of a payoff here beyond simply just people retweeting you or you acquiring followers? And then the final question is, how would you counsel in-house marketers at law firms and attorneys themselves contemplating either pushing their attorneys on Twitter or those attorneys getting on themselves? How would you guide them as to getting on and getting their feet wet?
I over the years, being on social and being on Twitter has, resulted in, client here, client there, interactions, more for informational gathering. And then someone might reach out to me directly through the website saying they saw a post of mine. I did a lot of blogging as well. But Twitter specific really wasn't a major avenue early on for direct acquisition of clients, until maybe a couple of years ago, when the follower count started to increase from 2,000 to 3,000, now over 4,000, and hopefully growing. Gotta keep up with it. But as it's kind of, that validation has sort of come in, not only through, my own profile and my posts, but also through others, and kind of being part of this SMB/franchise community of people that are just interested in getting into the industry. And until that validation occurred, when that validation occurred is when it started to pick up and it's pretty crazy right now, with people reaching out saying they saw a Twitter post or they've DM'd me and I say, hey, shoot me an email. Let's talk formally. And that's happening. I mean, I just represented a small private equity firm that was private investment firm that was doing a deal. And I got them through Twitter, and, still interact with the owner, and the owner's mentioning me. And then all of a sudden everyone's kind of saying, oh, who's this franchise attorney? So it's good to get that validation from your community. And that really, really has helped me not only grow my followers, but grow my direct client acquisition from Twitter. As far as the in-house firm marketing team, I will say from my own experience, the head of the firm, Jerry Greenspoon, I saw him at the Christmas event, and it's almost like he knows me because of my Twitter. He follows me, and so joining a firm that really supports individual client or individual lawyer growth and marketing and creating kind of a personal brand was important to me. And I feel like where I landed after having my own firm and doing really whatever I wanted for 8-9 years, going into a firm, it could have gone two ways. And it really has been, I think, an extra layer of marketing for me. On top of the Twitter, my internal team is able to, blast out when I get mentioned, and really we've created our own website for our practice groups. It's been a great experience. But for other firms, I'd just say to firm marketers, let the attorneys be them, be genuine. Some of the best handles out there in the big firm space, like Bradford Harden and Michelle Strohero, they're big mega firms, and they are out there posting, their recipes, what they're baking that day, and it's through those interactions, those personal interactions, that people kind of get to know who you are as a person. You establish that trust that you are a good attorney, know what you're talking about. And from there, it either leads to, client interactions, and real, business generation. And it's like, why not? Why not let lawyers be themselves? Certainly within some moderation of making sure they understand they shouldn't be posting, conspiracy theories and whatnot. But, I think letting lawyers kind of pull back the curtain a little bit and show who they are, and also that they are an authority in their particular area of law is really, it's worked for me. And I think it's a good starting point if the firms don't have that sort of policy.
And that, I assume that's your advice for the lawyers themselves, is to not be so buttoned up. Don't hide behind the curtains, to come out, be authentic, be yourself. You don't have to violate ethics rules. You don't have to give out confidential information, but still be the kind of attorney who is generous with their knowledge, with their wisdom, and get out there and become known. Because when people get to know you, again, as we said earlier, with the professional content, but also the personal and lifestyle content, you build a relationship. And clients and referral sources, those are relationships. And sometimes they start with your kids' little league or dance classes, and sometimes it starts on Twitter or LinkedIn through messages.
Yeah, absolutely. And in my experience at Wasch Rains, my partner, he'd go to the BNIs, he'd go to the networking groups, and his clients were hyper local, right? Like almost like, you could do a little, circle around our office, and that's where he was getting clients. He wasn't anywhere near social or on Twitter. And for me, I'm able to reach people all over the globe, and my clients are all over the country, international, and I like to attribute a lot of that to where people are, where they are, and being on Twitter, being in our little community of deal lawyers and SMB owners and SMB searchers and just entrepreneurs looking to, purchase small businesses and roll them up into, bigger organizations. All those people are everywhere, and it's just great to be able to have that platform through Twitter to be able to reach them and then work with them on their deals.
Adam, you are a shining example of a lawyer, a partner at a corporate law firm, an AmLaw 200 law firm, who still, you went out on social media, you're using Twitter to build your practice, you're able to balance the professional content with the lifestyle content, you're able to balance the work priorities and the client work with being on Twitter. So I think you are a great example and a great model for attorneys who want to get out there, who want to use social media, whether it's Twitter or Facebook or TikTok or LinkedIn, but to be able to use social media in a professional manner, but in a way that speaks to would-be clients and would-be referral sources. Great job with what you're doing on Twitter. Congrats what you've done so far. Good luck with the future. Can you tell people how to find you either through Twitter or any other social media channels or any other contact methods?
Yep. So my Twitter handle is at Adam G Wasch. That's WASCH. Then there's an ESQ at the end. So Adam G Wasch-esque. I'm on LinkedIn as well. Certainly reach out via DM and give you my life story or my signature block and shoot you an email so you can have all my work contact info. But that's how to find me. I'm out there and certainly willing to respond quickly to any inquiries.
And we'll put your handles in the show notes so no one has to worry about getting the spelling or the exact location of ESQ correct. Adam, thanks again for informing my audience about how to get on Twitter as lawyers, and perhaps you might see a migration to franchise law based on your explanation of the 5 pillars and all of the cool things that you do as a franchise lawyer. Thanks again for your time and giving your knowledge and your wisdom to my audience.
Thank you, Wayne. I really appreciate it. And thanks for having me.